The Wild West wasn't just about gunslingers and gold rushes. It was also a time of downright disgusting hygiene. From dirt-filled towns to shocking bathroom habits, these facts will make you thankful for modern-day cleanliness. Styling one's hair didn't involve the best hygiene practices. In the Old West, hair care was far from modern, but definitely inventive. Without the luxury of shampoos, people improvised with what was available. Some used soapweed as a cleanser, while others turned to whiskey mixed with castor oil as a makeshift hair wash. Once applied, the mixture was rinsed out with rainwater or softened with borax, a sodium-based compound. Styling was no less creative. Though tools like straighteners or curling irons didn't exist, vanity still thrived. Women heated pencils to use as curlers, proving that even in the rough-and-tumble Wild West, beauty and style weren't forgotten. Women set the bar of hygiene higher than the men. In the Wild West, women were known for maintaining higher hygiene standards than men. While men often spent days outdoors in the dusty, rugged environment and could go long stretches without bathing, women took more care in staying clean. Even with limited resources, women made an effort to wash their hands and faces regularly, setting themselves apart from the men, whose bathing routines were usually basic and infrequent. Despite the harsh conditions, women's attention to hygiene reflected their determination to maintain a sense of dignity and self-care in a challenging era. Sharing is caring, but it's not hygienic. A trip to the bar today usually means a comfy seat, a drink menu, and a more hygienic experience. In the Wild West, however, the scene was very different. Instead of stools, bars featured rails where customers could prop up their feet and relax. Towels hung from hooks on these rails, meant to wipe away the beer from men's faces and beards. However, these towels were far from clean. They were shared by countless patrons, rarely washed, and served as a perfect breeding ground for germs and diseases. Hygiene was not a priority, and these well-used towels quickly became a health hazard in the rough-and-tumble environment of Wild West saloons. Having a disease was a guaranteed experience. The Wild West was a breeding ground for germs, with its unsanitary living conditions and contaminated resources. It wasn't surprising that diseases regularly swept through settlements, affecting everyone. One of the deadliest was cholera, which spread through contaminated food and water, devastating both Native Americans and settlers alike. No one was safe from its deadly reach. Over time, it became more common to find a settlement plagued by disease than one that was healthy. The constant outbreaks of illness were a grim reality of life in the Wild West, where cleanliness and medical knowledge were in short supply. The dirty habit of spitting tobacco. In the Old West, chewing tobacco was a common pastime among men, but it came with a nasty habit: spitting. Once their mouths were filled with a mix of tobacco juice and saliva, they would spit it out, often without much thought about where it landed. Saloon floors were frequent targets, but to maintain some level of cleanliness, bars began lining up spittoons, small pots specifically meant for spitting. These spittoons, however, weren't much better. They were usually filled with sawdust to absorb the tobacco juice, but this only added to the problem. Over time, the sawdust would become filthy and start to stink, creating an even bigger health risk. Between the constant spitting and the unsanitary conditions, it's no wonder saloons were far from hygienic. If you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps us out. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on more amazing content. Various insects were a menace in Wild West society. Public spaces in the Old and terrifying force of nature. These storms could appear without warning, blanketing entire towns in thick layers of dirt and grime. Beyond making everything filthy, they posed serious health risks, often leading to respiratory problems for those exposed. Sarah Raymond Herndon, who traveled the region in the 1860s, described the experience vividly. "Oh, the dust, it is terrible. I have never seen it half as bad. It seems to be almost knee-deep in places. When we stopped, the boys' faces were a sight. They were covered with all the dust that could stick on." Cleaning up after a storm wasn't easy either. These layers of dust couldn't simply be swept away, making life even more challenging in an already harsh environment. Outhouses offered an unhygienic experience. Using the bathroom in the Wild West was far from convenient or sanitary. Instead of modern restrooms, people had outhouses, simple wooden sheds placed over a hole in the ground. These makeshift toilets were used until the hole filled up, at which point the structure would be relocated to a new spot. The design alone was unpleasant, but the smell made it worse, attracting insects and creating the perfect breeding ground for diseases. To top it off, there was no toilet paper. People had to rely on whatever was available, leaves, corn cobs, or even grass, to clean up, making the entire experience as uncomfortable as it was unhygienic. Life in the Wild West truly lacked modern comforts. The iconic kerchief was not only a fashion statement. If you're dressing up for a Wild West-themed party, the iconic cowboy hat, waistcoat, and kerchief are must-have items. While today, a kerchief is often seen as just a stylish accessory, back in the days of the American frontier, it was a crucial tool for survival. The kerchief served multiple purposes. It kept dust out of the nose and mouth during windy days, protected the skin from the harsh sun and cold, and even helped hide the faces of outlaws. Typically red and made from a variety of materials, these versatile pieces of cloth were far more than a fashion statement. They were a lifeline in the rough conditions of the Wild West, a hairstyle transformation for the men. In the Wild West, it was common for men to have long, rugged hair and facial beards, giving them a bold, masculine appearance. However, as the 19th century drew to a close, the availability of new hygiene products sparked a transformation in men's grooming habits. With better hair care options becoming more accessible, men started realizing the hygiene risks of keeping their hair long and unkempt. It wasn't long before they embraced a cleaner, more polished look, cutting their hair shorter and shaving their faces for a sharper, more refined appearance. The Wild West's rugged style gradually gave way to a more modern, smoldering aesthetic. The lack of bathing introduced multiple fungal infections. While cowboys were skilled at outrunning bandits and wildlife, they couldn't escape the consequences of their unsanitary habits. It was common for them to go weeks, sometimes even months, without a proper bath. Wearing the same clothes for days and spending hours on horseback led to a price they had to pay: fungal infections. These infections often appeared in uncomfortable areas like the crotch, armpits, buttocks, and feet, causing not just visible symptoms, but also intense itching and burning. The problem worsened as cowboys scratched the affected areas with dirty hands, unknowingly spreading the bacteria and making the infections even more difficult to treat. What is that horrible smell? Cowboys spent countless hours riding across the country, often dodging bandits and living in the wild. When they couldn't take the heat and thirst any longer, they'd head to the nearest town and grab a seat at the local bar. While their horses remained tied outside, the smell of their long ride always came inside with them. The combination of hours spent on horseback and the lack of regular bathing made it hard to shake off that distinctive odor. This unsanitary lifestyle also meant that even small cuts or abrasions were at a high risk of becoming infected with highly contagious skin diseases. Turns out, the cowboy life wasn't as glamorous as Hollywood made it out to be. Venereal diseases were as popular as skin infections. In the Wild West, the rough and unpredictable lifestyle often led to intimate encounters at saloons, inns, and other establishments. These frequent casual relationships were one of the driving forces behind the spread of venereal diseases, which were rampant during that time. Without much understanding of how these diseases worked, they spread like wildfire among the population. The idea of using protection wasn't even considered. as most people had little to no knowledge about sexually transmitted infections and how they spread. With no cures or effective treatments available, any moment of intimacy was often followed by the unfortunate consequences of infection, leaving men and women suffering from unpleasant symptoms like itching, sores, and discomfort. For many, this was just another risk they lived with in a society that wasn't exactly focused on hygiene or health. The diet in the Wild West wasn't as bad as you'd think. Despite the many hardships and unhealthy habits that characterized life in the Wild West, the diet of those living in the frontier was surprisingly decent and provided a good foundation for survival. The food consumed depended largely on the resources available in the region, with local wildlife and plants playing a vital role. Indigenous plants like wild berries, roots, and greens offered valuable nutrients, while animals such as rabbits, buffalo, and other game were hunted for meat, providing both sustenance and variety in meals. Though it wasn't always easy to get a wide range of ingredients, dried provisions like flour, beans, and sugar were essential staples that could be stored for longer periods. These ingredients were used to make hearty dishes, including stews, soups, and bread. Cooking methods were basic but effective, with settlers relying on tools like Dutch ovens, frying pans, and boiling pots to prepare their meals. Shows were the entertainment alternative to the saloon. While saloons and their rowdy, drunken nights were often a central part of life in the Wild West, there were also other, more family-friendly forms of entertainment available. One of the most popular alternatives was live shows, which provided a unique form of spectacle that brought people together. Among the most famous of these performances was Buffalo Bill's Wild West Show. Buffalo Bill, whose real name was William F. Cody, was not just a former Pony Express rider and soldier, but also a buffalo hunter. He channeled his adventurous spirit and business acumen into creating a highly successful traveling show that showcased reenactments of frontier life, complete with cowboys, Native American performers, sharpshooters, and reenacted battles. The shows offered a glimpse into the thrilling, yet often romanticized life of the Wild West. Audiences could watch daring stunts and witness historical events being brought to life. They quickly became so popular that Buffalo Bill took his show on the road, not only across the United States but also internationally, bringing it to Europe and creating an international phenomenon. These performances provided an exciting and entertaining alternative to the saloon for those looking for a different type of thrill. And there you have it, just a glimpse into the fascinating and sometimes gritty lifestyle of the Wild West. If you enjoyed this look back at history, don't forget to like and subscribe for